Welcome, everyone. My name is Terrell Williams, and I serve as one of the associate directors here in the admissions office here at Sloan. I'm really excited about the opportunity to host tonight's kickoff for our community and culture series and being able to learn more about the veteran community here at Sloan. Also, firmly believe that through tonight's panel discussion, as well as other recruiting events that you all select to participate in, you will see our commitment to creating a more diverse and inclusive community. I will be monitoring our Q&A chat as well, so feel free to drop questions for our panelists in the Q&A feature, and we'll flag some of them to answer live. But before we begin, I do want to share tonight's overall agenda. So we'll start off with a high-level overview of our degree programs. Then we'll get our moderator to introduce himself as well as the panelists for the evening. And then we'll have about a 40-minute or so panel discussion. So we do have some moderated questions, but also those questions that you're sharing will be used for our conversation tonight. And then I'll do some wrap-up with some admissions overview as well as some application information for you all as well. So I do want to start off tonight's session with our mission. MIT Sloan is a mission-driven school, and we are seeking out students who align with the collaborative nature of our community. The desire for our students to make an impact is central to the MIT Sloan experience. So, what you'll hear tonight is kind of going to tie into that mission-driven approach based off of our individuals' experience here at Sloan, but also their pre-MBA as well as post-graduate journey as well. Here's a high-level overview of our robust portfolio of programs. Our community includes and supports students across its entire portfolio and the larger MIT ecosystem. So our moderator for the evening tonight is a LGO student, and we do have two MBA students on our panel as well as a Sloan Fellow graduate as well. So you will be able to hear from those dynamic perspectives. For those of you that may be on the early career side, we do offer a Master of Finance and Master of Business Analytics for those early career or career launching programs for college seniors or those with minimal work experience. The MBA early is not a program on its own, but more aligned with the early career audience and then applicants directly applying to the MBA. So if you're somebody that's considering an MBA, you're currently an undergrad, that could be a good opportunity for you to kind of have a deferred admission and be able to join when you're ready. To be considered for the MS program or a Master's in Management Studies, only graduates and current students from partner international universities are eligible to apply. Our full-time two-year MBA program is our flagship program here at Sloan and our largest of the ones that you see here. We're welcoming about 400 plus students in about 2 weeks, so we're really excited about welcoming this class of 2028. We are in the process. I have launched a evening program as well. So for those of you that want to remain working and be able to kind of take class in the evening time, that is option that's available for you as well. We'll talk more about that application process a little bit later in the evening as well. And then I do want to wrap up with our two executive level programs geared towards those mid-senior level managers. So we do have our 1 year Sloan Fellows MBA, as well as the 20-month executive MBA for individuals that may be considering going to school full time, but just attending on a monthly basis. So for the Sloan Fellows program, that is fully immersive in comparison to the executive MBA program that I just mentioned. For those individuals, they have about 14 to 16 years of work experience and about 80% of them are director level or above. So if that falls within your particular experiences, we definitely encourage you to consider one of those executive level degree programs as an option. So I do want to pass it off to our moderator for tonight. So Will, I will have you introduce yourself, give a little bit of background, and then pass it off to our panelists to do the same. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Terrell. Can you hear me all right? I was having some issues just a minute ago. Can you hear me? Awesome. So, hi everyone. I'm Will Weiswinger. I'm a current MIT Sloan LGO student. So Terrell mentioned the program earlier. It is an MBA through Sloan and then a master's in engineering. And I'm also one of the VPs of admissions for the Sloan Vets Club. So there's a chance that I've probably spoken to many of you on this call at this point. And I'll be monitoring our conversation tonight, so I'll pass it on to Terrell to introduce the rest of the panel. All right, so let's go ahead and move on with the introduction of our panelists. So for the three of you on the panel, I'll just ask you to briefly share your name, what Sloan program you were a part of, which is on there right now, and then what you were doing before Sloan and what you're doing now.
Yeah, I can kick us off. Matthew Gooden, NBA 26, graduated obviously early, well, a few months back. And what I was doing before Sloan was logistics and supply chain management. And I currently serve as the director of logistics.
Hi, everybody. I'm Charlotte. Before going to Sloan, I was in the Marine Corps. I was a signals intelligence officer. And then after that, I went straight to Sloan for the full time MBA program. And now I just started at BCG, just doing generalist consulting in the New York City office.
Hey everybody, Wayne O'Donnell here, Coast Guard officer. I was sponsored by the Coast Guard through the 1 year MBA, Sloan Fellow MBA program. Now I'm back with the Coast Guard, just promoted and I'm the budget director now. Used to be cool and fly helicopters, but now I sit at a desk at headquarters. So look forward to talking to y'all.
So thanks everyone. So for the panelists, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the decision that you all made just a few years ago when it came to choosing Sloan and why you made that decision. What about Sloan was the most attractive for you, and why did you feel that it was the best program for you coming out of the military? I'll start with Matthew.
Yeah. So great question. I think the biggest thing for me is, when I applied to Sloan, obviously the MIT brand is extremely strong, right? And I think we all know this. When I applied to Sloan, I kind of applied cold and I contacted Sloanie's, let's just call it, I saw them on the website, reached out to them and you know, these individuals didn't know me personally, have any personal connection, but they generally all made the effort to, sit down, talk, schedule a chat. And this concept of Sloanies helping Sloanies, obviously, I think you'll probably hear about that for, duration of this panel. But like that's something that I saw firsthand. And that told me that, Sloanies were the kind of people that I identified with. And that was like my main draw to Sloan outside of the huge brand that obviously exists.
Yeah, I can go next. We'll just go down the line. Very similar to Matt's point, for me, the first thing about business school that was important leaving the military was like back at school, campus feel, like feeling really involved in the student body. And it's nice. Everyone lives in Cambridge. You're all like walking to school together. It's a very like live-in experience. The second one was the Sloanie vibe is just really grounded, down to earth, welcoming people. Of course, everyone has a competitive mindset, but at Sloan, it's competitive with yourself. It's not really competitive with each other. And I know some other schools can have like a little bit of the intense competitive vibe. And then the last thing was the tech edge that MIT will bring just because it's MIT. I think it's a really awesome way to brand yourself when you're comparing yourself to all these other post MBA students. The way the world is going with Gen AI and tech, like having MIT on your resume for like your personal branding is honestly huge, and like no other school can compare to that. Those were my reasons.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a unique situation where the Coast Guard sponsored me. They sponsor one person for the last 50 years, or sorry, yeah, 50 years to attend the Sloan Fellow program and to go through that. And so I was lucky enough to be that guy. But uh, I actually started an executive MBA at Georgetown before I got picked up by the Coast Guard to be sponsored for this program. And so I never thought I was going to get into MIT, and I did. But the reason for the MBA was kind of like has already been said. I'm over 20 years of service. I know I need to translate some of my skills into something that's marketable on the outside, and so MBA was the way to go based on what I was doing, and MIT was the perfect blend for that. Of I had worked for a few folks that have been to this program, and knowing the caliber of those folks and what type of stuff they were working on, from the AI space to the tech world. It was a great opportunity to get involved in that and get my hands dirty, as compared to what I was doing in the Georgetown MBA.
I think those were all really good summaries of what drives most of the students that end up deciding on Sloan. Now, I know many of the students are probably getting, or many of the applicants are probably getting ready to either apply round one or they'll be applying round two. And one challenge that I feel like nearly every veteran faces is figuring out how to translate your military background for an admissions audience. What do each of you think is the most effective way to tie your experience into the Sloan application? And any other just a general application advice? What's the best piece of advice that you might have received when you were applying? Start with Wayne this time. We'll go back.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate it. One, I'd say don't self-select out of applying. I never thought I'd be a guy that was an MIT graduate, and so one, uh, if you're here on your call, you're obviously interested, so don't self-select yourself out of the programs. But two, I think it's just like interviewing for jobs outside the service. I imagine because I'm about to go through this process, and so I've been told, but speaking to your military service and what you did and the leadership experience behind it is a way to kind of translate eloquently and speak a little bit about yourself to endear folks to you, but don't make the whole application all about the military and the only things you did in the military. Like it's good to talk about what you've done and why you did it, but how is MIT the right next step for you, and where are you trying to go beyond service or in my case taking it trying to advance my career within the service. And so, um, yeah, just try to put it in plain English, speak about yourself, and use it as like an endearing way to talk about military service to folks that are on the missions panel that probably don't know it very well, but really tie it to uh, non-military things, using the military stuff to talk about how your leadership skills and why Sloan is the right place for you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I can piggyback off Wayne. I think, one of the key points he made is, leave the jargon out, right? I think, think about it or frame it as if, the different branches, even when we're talking to each other, right? There's some elements of things that we might need to explain that it's just not, it's not common knowledge, right? So just kind of understand that about what you do and your specialty, and break it down in this way where the common person can understand kind of what you did and what your experience is. And the last thing I'll share is, you know, really tell that story, right? I think for as veterans, the competitive advantage we have very often is that we get the opportunity to lead people, right? And have, let's call it, large scale organizational impact. So tell that story, right? I think when you think about the quality of applicant that's applying to MIT, generally they're going to be smart, right? Good test scores, good grades, GPA, et cetera. So those things obviously is the expectation. I think where you can set yourself apart is sharing these unique experiences, right? You can share positive stories about leadership and impact, or lessons learned from, let's call it, not so great things that you might have experienced that hopefully you can learn from and makes you a better, leader, operator, manager. So I think, find ways to give your experience that competitive advantage.
I can close it out. I think there's three things that are helpful to translate your experience into like an admissions ready application. The first is have someone like your mom or your sister or whoever that you trust to read your application and ask them, do you understand what I'm saying? Because I think sometimes we think we're translating it into like normal civilian terms, but like you're really not. And the only way to know that is to like have a random civilian who doesn't understand military stuff read it and see if they get your story. The other thing I found really helpful in recruiting also was talking to other MBA vets who had recruited for what I wanted and asking them to send me their resume if they were willing, because they've already gone through the whole process of scrubbing it, and just like getting that inspiration, even if they don't have a similar job to you, and like seeing how they tweaked some words and stuff was super helpful. For example, like in the Marine Corps, I was a platoon commander, but like no one really knows what that is. So feel free to like change what that says on your resume. It feels weird to like change the title, but like change the title according to who's going to read it. It's okay. And then the last thing is, at least for your resume specifically, I used ChatGPT a lot. Caveat, don't have it write your resume at all. What you can do is like upload the context. Like here is MIT Sloan's website. Like here is the job I want to recruit for. Here is the qualities they care about. Okay, here's bullet number one. I wrote it like this. I want to edit it to display XYZ. How can you help me rephrase it? And like go back and forth and be very like surgical about what you put in there and go like bullet by bullet, one by one. And then that should work.
Sure, that was great advice. I did the exact same thing that you just described. It's extremely helpful, especially with all the tools that we have now. They're just getting better and better. But before I move on to just the Sloan experience as a veteran, do any of you want to bring up just like one piece of advice that you think was the best advice that you got about the application beyond just the narrative piece, the story, translating your experience? Was there one piece of advice that another veteran gave you when you started to apply to MBA programs that you thought was especially meaningful? And just if one of you has that.
I mean, I can jump on this one. Charlotte kind of touched on it. Seeing an example of what a winning thing looks like, I think is helpful, right? I know when I was applying, I had served with, one or two individuals who had, gotten into an MIT or, school down the street from us, and getting a peek at their application package, their resume, kind of, how did they translate their skill set to kind of this committee. It was very helpful, right? I like for me personally, I know what I had drafted before, and then after just reviewing, like I said, a close contacts kind of, who was nice enough to send me over, a copy of their package that had been admitted. I kind of realized like I needed to make a lot of tweaks and I needed to really translate things in a way that they weren't worded. So I think Charlotte made that point, and I'd kind of just echo that, right? Don't be afraid to kind of, to ask. Worst thing somebody can do is say no.
Thank you, Matthew. So, moving on to that transition, when you finally get to Sloan, a question a lot of applicants have is, what was the most difficult adjustment you experienced going from the military life to being a student at Sloan? Um, I guess we'll start with Charlotte, please.
Um, I'm kind of laughing because I had this conversation with my dad actually during the core semester in recruiting. Because I feel like I thought like, oh, I'm a Marine, like I can do anything, like this is just business school. And like the first month was hard. And I like called my dad and I was like, Dad, civilians work really hard. Like I don't know what I was thinking. Um, but like jokes aside, like you'll all be fine. Like it's really fine at the end of the day. But I think just like getting ready to work hard in a different type of way, like in this academic cerebral way that is different from the military, I think was an adjustment, like getting hit with it all at once. Um, there's nothing you can really do to like prepare for that, but just like embrace it, lean on your friends, and just like really lean on your peers. Like veterans and non-veterans, everyone's going through the core at the same time. But I feel like that was something I wasn't really expecting, I guess.
Yeah, I'd offer just very tactically at after 20 years of being in the service, going to Sloan was the first time that I didn't have like a regimented schedule anymore. And so while you have classes and all that kind of stuff for the Sloan Fellows, it's very regimented over the summertime, usually start in June, and they cram six core MBA classes over the summer. So you go from like, you know, 8 to 5 each day with class activities throughout the summer. Um, and so it's a long day of classes, and that part's relatively regimented. But to go into the fall and not have classes on Friday and not start class till 10, it was really easy to start sleeping in and and not do some basics. And so I found myself a lot of time for activities like working out and stuff like that, which was great. Uh, but it was harder than I expected. One, to geo batch for the first time away from my wife and kids, but two, to make a consistent routine, something that I could, get on a routine to study, get on a routine to get back in the groove of academics after being out of it for so long. Was harder than I thought it was going to be. But again, uh, I think I say that knowing that probably everybody on the call is going to be just fine. As Charlotte said, you're going to be able to do it. once you get in. But it was surprising how quickly those skills had atrophied, and I had to get them back.
So what I'll say is, similar to Wayne, I'm also Navy sponsored. So I mean, the Navy paid for, I did the 2 year program. So the Navy paid for the 2 years, and then obviously I'm back doing work with the Navy. And a couple of things for me. One, the big thing about the experience for me was really immerse yourself into the experience. And what I'll say is, as Charlotte alluded to a little bit, the core is an intense, first couple of weeks at Sloan, not just academically, but networking, right? You're meeting 400 plus people in your current year, and then obviously there's 400 people in the previous year. And so there's lots of events, there's academics, right? There's recruiting, at some point once you get your feet wet. And so the moral of the story is you're juggling a lot of things. And so, time management, prioritization, and really just keeping like a level head and just knowing that you're fine, right? You had the skill set to get you to this point, and so you'll be able to get through this next phase. But I can say initially, it can feel very intense, and it can feel a little overwhelming. But looking back at it now, it was it's a phenomenal time, phenomenal.
Yeah. Thank you all. And then this next question, it's actually from one of the attendees and also about the Sloan experience, but what was the most impactful class or organization that you were a part of while you were at Sloan? Start with Charlotte again.
The first one that comes to mind is surprising, but it's DMD, which is like the dreaded, scary class. And I was really lucky because I had it with Professor Rama, who's like so famous at Sloan. But it was most impactful for me because I am not a math person, I'm not a data person, like at all. And the idea of coding terrified me. And in that class, I was expecting to hate it. And I ended up loving it. I was really bad at it, to be clear. Like, I didn't do well. But, like, I just loved every class. I thought it was so interesting. And it inspired me to take, like, a couple more, like, data analytics classes after. And so I think just, like, embracing the data analytics vibe of Sloan and embracing the tech vibe of Sloan and, like, machine learning just changed my whole, like, outlook on Gen AI and things like that. And now I'm, like, a huge Professor Rama fan. So even if you don't go to Sloan, you should follow him on LinkedIn because he's just like profound in his AI understanding and stuff like that.
Arnie?
I can jump in, Wayne, if you want to gather your thoughts. So two courses. One, Don Saul teaches a course called Competitive Strategy. You had the opportunity to take it in the core semester or later on, depending on the timing. I chose to take it later on, and what I will say is that uh, competitive strategy and the way Don kind of breaks down what I would call concepts that are like, commonplace, like, commonly known, but in this, very simple kind of framework kind of manner. He really teaches you how to think, right? I think that was one of the cool experiences is sitting in a classroom, learning from a professor in during class, and actually like learning how to think very strategically. That was very impactful for me, and I say that I will probably refer to the contents of that class and in the framework and in the thinking in most of the business endeavors that I pursue, from this point forward. I also took this IAP course called effectively it's an impact course, and we spent a week. So social impact lab was the name of the course. We spent a week effectively working with a local nonprofit. I ended up working with this organization called Youth Guidance Boston that works with young men and young women ages 9 to 18 who are in high school or middle school, etc. And who need guidance, who need mentorship, who need let's call it development. And this 1 week experience was very impactful for me. At the end of the experience, I was invited to join the board of Youth Guidance Boston. So I'm still active in that organization today. And that was a result of a 1 week IAP course. So that's kind of what I'd share.
Yeah, and just to add on, I think there's a couple classes that come to mind that were really interesting. Most of them were like special seminars that a couple instructors put on. One in public policy and the private sector that was taught by the recent Nobel laureate while I was there, and then another one on Gen AI for managers, which was really interesting and kind of a deep dive into Gen AI, which I found super interesting. But probably the most impactful thing at Sloan with the cohort was some of the cohort engagements and some of the stuff that they facilitated through the Sloan Fellows, at least, of just getting to know my classmates who were, also 15 years, 10 to 15 years into their careers and from lots of different countries and beyond the classroom. Probably just the interactions with them was the most impactful that I'll carry forward in my leadership experience going forward after Sloan.
Thank, thank you all. And then kind of moving on to that classic career question. I know we have a diverse group within this panel. We have two people that are or that went back to the military, whether they were sponsored or part of the program you were in, Wayne. So I'll start with both of you and ask, how did you take full advantage of all the opportunities here, knowing that you were going back in the military, and how have you continued to kind of take advantage of those same opportunities and setting yourself up for a potential career outside of the military?
Yeah, it was interesting from my standpoint, I guess. The 1 year program, knowing I'm going back to the Coast Guard towards the end of my 1 year, lots of my classmates were job hunting, looking for what they were going to land at, where they were going to land, what career fields they wanted to go into, the folks that were switching, where they were trying to get to. So it was interesting to kind of watch that. And I think somewhat of a disadvantage not having that network right at my fingertips whenever I do get out of the service here in the next couple of years. But I think I still keep in touch with my entire cohort regularly, all about 100 of them, probably not all 100 of them, probably at least half of them. I keep in regular contact with, um, and they're active on the group chat and individual chats, and so I think uh, going to a place like Sloan, it's an incredible group of people. I imagine the MBA is the same exact as the Sloan Fellow MBA, where it's just a lot of really incredible people that you get to cross paths with that I never would have crossed paths with had I just stayed in my Coast Guard bubble. Uh, and so by getting to know those folks, making friends with those folks, hanging out with those folks in class and outside of class, um, I think those contacts will just pay dividends, and hopefully a couple of them hit it big and can hire me when I'm due to retire.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll echo kind of similar sentiments. I think, you know, being sponsored kind of depressurized, let's call it the experience a little bit. So it allowed me to kind of immerse myself into things that I wanted to index in. And, one of the things that I think was important for me was relationships. I think the value of an MBA a lot of times is the relationships. I mean, obviously you learn some things, but I think the kind of relationships you build and the things you learn from those relationships can have a lot of value. And I can say, as someone who's been in the uniform for, 16 years now, so effectively most of my professional life, I learned a ton from my civilian counterparts, right? Like I feel like, I have a PhD in industry just based on spending 2 years with people who came from everything from consulting, banking, operations, strategy, whatever, right? And talking about their experiences, learning from them in class, really gave me a really good perspective, industry wise. And then beyond that, I came to business school with the goal of figuring out who I wanted to be when I grow up. And I think, I did that. And I'll just put this plug out there for some people, maybe the sparks something in the room, but one of the things that was was called a hallmark for business at business school for me was, immersing myself into ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition, right? And figuring out that that's ultimately where I want to be, and that's kind of the next chapter for me. And then being able to step through that in Sloan and learn a ton was incredible.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And then Charlotte, you followed the more prototypical MBA path. I'm sure there's plenty of people in the audience, myself included, that want to be consultants. I'm waiting for full-time recruiting because of my LGO internship, but I'm going to leave it pretty open-ended. You could just talk about what it was like recruiting, what made you successful. I mean, you've done what so many vets aspire to do when they're transitioning out and getting their MBAs.
Yeah, I guess I'll try to answer this one like just regular non-consulting route, and then I'll go into the consulting thing. Um, this is an advice I got from a mentor who was also in the Marine Corps and got his MBA. And I think it's really true. You should go into the MBA knowing what you want to do. You can change your mind, but you should really spend this time before school starts or time when you're applying, like calling people, calling mentors. Like I cold messaged people on LinkedIn and like some of them responded, and just asking around and trying to understand like what do different careers look like? What do I want to do? I thought I wanted to do venture capital for like 2 months, and then I changed my mind and did consulting. But really like play around, read, watch day in the life of like whoever, to try to understand what you want your life to look like, because when you show up on campus, you're going to be flooded with like a million things to do, a million opportunities to seize. And 2 years goes by so fast, and you cannot possibly do everything. So you want to go in knowing like, here's my plan A, here's my plan D, I'm going to like dabble in a little bit, and like here's a plan C that I'll like keep my ear out for. Like go hard for plan A, but also like you can go to some plan B events and things like that. But I would really just like try to have like 2 or 3 ideas of what you want to do. Okay, pivot to consulting. Like, you kind of have to decide if you want to do that when you show up or in September. Um, my philosophy was I felt like for me, I had to try a lot harder than my other classmates to get the job that I wanted. Just because what you will find is a lot of people recruiting for consulting like came from a consulting firm in the past, or they came from finance, or they came from some other business background where some of this stuff came easier to them. But like you're jumping in to the core semester, I didn't know what any business acronym meant at all. Like I knew nothing about anything. And so I felt like I had to ramp up a lot faster and also just like put in more hours and put in more work. So I would say like if you want to do consulting and like probably also investment banking, like be ready to grind. Don't listen to your peers who are like, oh, like I'm gonna wait till later. Oh, I'm only gonna do like this many cases. Like you should grind because it is hard, and like over preparing and just like getting in the reps, like truly nothing compares to that. And I feel like that is what saved me at the end, was just like putting my nose down and working hard. And it's like totally doable, and you as a vet can totally do it. I would just acknowledge like you might have to put in more work than your other non-veteran friends.
Thank you, Charlotte. And this next question, I'm trying to capture a few of the questions that were sent in from the audience, but they're really all shaped around leadership and applying the leadership you had, the leadership experience you had in the military, once you were at Sloan or in your following career in Charlotte's situation, and maybe more generally, like what did you learn about your leadership experience that you didn't necessarily know prior to getting this Sloan?
Happy to jump on this one first. I took a contrarian approach to this one actually. I think, and I think if you have leadership experience, obviously you need, on your application, you need to spell that out because it's some element of your competitive advantage. But I think when you get here at Sloan, depending on your leadership experience, it's kind of important for vets to understand that it's a tricky balance, right? The your MBA, you're in a place of your peers, right? And so, we kind of understand that peer leadership sometimes is a little bit more challenging than just, let's call it, traditional leadership. And you don't necessarily want to come off as the only person who knows the answer, right? And so the approach that I took was to lead when necessary, but allow my peers an opportunity, because there's tons of people that are going through the program with different experiences, and maybe this is their first time getting an opportunity to lead. And the approach I took was I wanted to be able to foster that as much as possible, provide a backstop, provide guidance as necessary, but I didn't want to impose, let's say, my level of experience on that group overly so. So I think that was just the approach I took. And I think I enjoyed it because it gave a healthy mix of being able to lead while also being able to follow and then watch people grow and develop in their own time.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I would offer from the application side that I touched on at the beginning there, like um I think pitfalls are military folks saying, well, I supervisor, I lead X number of people, therefore I can run a company of X number of people, right? That doesn't really translate. But at the same time, don't say none of my experience ever translates or applies to any business at all, right? There's a blend there in between that you can talk to what you do, maybe how you do it, from operations to leadership to strategy to whatever it is you're doing. Um, but I went into the Sloan Fellow program knowing that I probably didn't. I was probably one of the least qualified folks to talk business stuff out of the group of my cohort, that was a lot of which had pretty strong business backgrounds and were actively doing, whether it was consulting or VC or starting their own companies, entrepreneurs. And so I kind of took a backseat approach. I was used to leading and being in command, and from flying helicopters to doing other stuff. And so I tried to take my time at Sloan somewhat as a backseat to try to learn from others, and where I found, at least in the Sloan Fellow cohort, where people struggled was some of the basic stuff that I think military folks are really good at, of staying on task, building PowerPoints, some of the basic stuff. And so you get in a group, a lot of it's group work, a lot of group settings, and just jumping in and providing value of some of the basics where I could listen to other folks' ideas and try to absorb that while contributing by, doing some of the basic work of keeping folks moving, keeping products moving, putting stuff down on paper, taking notes, that kind of thing. So it sounds kind of silly, but the approach I took was try to step back from being a leader for 20 years and try to learn from somebody else, knowing that I don't know this world very well, and while still providing value where I could.
Yeah, I second all of that. You're with your peers, so you're not going to be leading how you're used to. And I think what you can do is, I think vets stand out in communication skills and like wrangling the team together to get to a common objective. So in your core teams, in your comms labs and things like that, that's where you'll probably shine. Just keeping in mind, like, these are your peers, so don't try and like do a platoon commander thing and boss them around, but you can use those skills that you've built to kind of like stay on task. When people go this way, you can bring them back in. But yeah, I do feel like it's kind of your time to let other people lead, since you have, years of experience that your peers don't have.
Thank you a lot. I think that was extremely well said. Especially, I think we all have that leadership experience. For me, when I was asking that question, I personally think that I underestimated my leadership experience, and there were times where when I was listening to you all speak, I thought about how I eventually realized that it was a strength, but I think it helped to initially underestimate it, because I did not come in kind of trying to be hard charging. Matthew, once again, I think you said that very, very well. So next question is about just really about your experience with other veterans at Sloan. Were any of you involved in the Sloan Veterans Club? And how much did the veteran community play into your experience at Sloan?
Yeah, I was a member of the Sloan Vets Club, and then there's also an MIT wide one that was not as robustly supported as the Sloan Vets Club, but both were interesting in their own ways, and provided from I think that the best stuff I would say is just sign up for everything that you can possibly go to. There's a lot of like lunch and learns, bring in veteran entrepreneurs for a lunch, bring in other speakers to just sit through a lunch session and just learn from somebody new, or hear somebody that came through Sloan or another business school or elsewhere that's starting their own starting their own company, and just getting background for them. But it was super valuable to sit in a room with a bunch of other veterans and just hear from another vet that's out there trying to do it. So I found that super valuable. And then I had the opportunity to go through it, Sloan Fellow program with two other active duty Navy guys uh, who became really good friends. And so looking to the folks that kind of have a similar background for you to lean on a little bit, while knowing that I don't think we were ever in the same group for like class projects, just because we all recognized early on that it probably wasn't great for the three of us just to sit in a little group and with same type of thinking and same group think and do the same thing over and over again. So uh, while we were super close and hung out all the time, I think we recognized it was probably valuable for us to get into and out of our comfort zone, into other groups, just to build that background and that experience. So um, yeah.
Yeah, I can add on. I was also a member of the Veterans Club. I feel like it was really helpful for recruiting for me, just to lean on them. You can be super candid with vets, obviously, and just get like unfiltered advice, someone to lean on when you go to recruiting events. Um, I also, a priority of mine was like getting to know everybody and not just siloing myself into the veterans community, which I think Sloan does a really good job of that. Like, it's there if you need it, it's there if you want it, and we have events. And we also have like our formal event, a mess night in the spring, which is really fun and just a way to like show what veterans do to everyone, and everyone comes and it's super fun. So I would definitely get involved with that. But yeah, it's kind of like if you want it, you can have it, but also like the vets kind of do their own thing.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the experience I had. I think I indexed more to getting to know, let's call it the general Sloan population, right? I was very, as a service member, I was very familiar with military folks, and I wanted to get a little bit more familiar with just, a diverse group of people who are professionals. But what I found with the Vets Club is, as a member, went to the events and done the socials and, our annual gala effectively, is that you have this bedrock of community with, shared values, shared, this just shared like experience. And so I think whenever you're, let's call it naked and afraid for lack of better terms, you have the vet community to be able to go and get some sound guidance and perspective. So that's, I think, the beautiful thing about it.
Nah, thank you all. And I think Charlotte might have mentioned it earlier when it comes to recruiting for consulting, reaching out to Sloan alumni. And one of the things I think she mentioned was that Sloan veteran alumni, it just adds that extra layer of alumni and students that you can reach out to, where you just have that kind of baseline level of comfort. And then moving on to the last question before I pass it on to Terrell, if you could go back to your first day at Sloan and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? We'll start with Charlotte.
Sorry, did you say me?
Yes, I did.
Uh, if someone has an answer, I might need to think on this. So feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I can jump in. Not a well thought out answer, but I'll give it. Um, business school is really fun, right? Like it's 2 years and it's incredibly fun. Depending obviously your program. Um, you meet a lot of people, you get a chance to get to know a lot of people, um, you know, in this like rapid sense. I think the advice I'd have it's that's good, but don't be afraid to kind of index on deeper ties. Or sometimes in the NBA community and in the NBA world, the loose ties we over-index on it, and I think you should because it's kind of a part of the process to network. But I think if you come to a program like this with only loose ties, I think it's a missed opportunity, right? And so that's the advice I give. I mean, I took that advice. I left B school with more than just loose ties, right? People who I think I genuinely care about, and they genuinely care about me. And it's not, can we add value to each other? It's just, do we care about each other as human beings? And I think that's also important on this journey, right? Life's about relationships. Sometimes that's transactional, and sometimes it's holistic. And so the advice I'd give is, don't be afraid to work on some holistic relationships during your journey.
Yeah, I think I'd second that of get out of your comfort zone as much as possible. As Matt said, kind of interact with the gem pop, right? Uh, the most valuable thing that I took away from Sloan was interactions with a bunch of classmates that I never would have crossed paths with had I not come to MIT, and just stayed in the Coast Guard, or stayed in the DC bubble, and stayed at Georgetown where I'd started. And so by kind of getting out of that mix and seeing a whole different group of folks and a whole different group of professors, and somebody completely outside this world, um, was the best value that I think I got out of going to Sloan. And so don't take that for granted. Show up to everything. Go to all the stupid, not stupid, sorry. Go to all the dinners. Go to all the lunches. Do all the activities. Right. Interact with your classmates in the cohort, uh, because those experiences ended up paying dividends for me with relationship building, and getting to know folks that I think will pay off in the long term.
Okay, I agree with all of them, and I have my 3 points. um, the first one that I did that I don't necessarily regret was I was just like so burnt out when I went to Sloan. So I made it like my time of hobbies. I took like a Sloan painting, sorry, not Sloan, an MIT painting class, which was really fun. There's like a whole art studio. You can sign up to take anything that you want. They have like pottery, painting, drawing. And then I also decided to take French classes, and I don't know French, and I like took it with the undergrads, and that was kind of fun. So definitely like take advantage of all of MIT because you can do like any classes that you want. But my regret was in pursuing my hobbies and kind of like taking a break and not doing a lot of leadership stuff. I did kind of regret not getting involved in like a Sloan specific extracurricular. I kind of just like did recruiting, got the job, and was like, woo, I can chill. Um, I think that there are a lot of amazing things that are specific to MIT. One of them is the Climate Energy Prize. It's so cool. I had a bunch of friends do it. It's like very legit. You get to travel all around and like interview with really big hot shots in the community. The Defense Tech Conference is like so amazing, and it's done by MIT and HBS. Sports Analytics Conference, like none of those things were something I wanted to pursue. Like I didn't think I wanted to do climate or stay in defense or sports analytics, but at the end of the day, I think consider pursuing something that Sloan is like famous for and does really well, because it's just going to be so cool and it's going to give you a lot of connections. So I regret not like pursuing one of those things. And then the last one, like Matt and Wayne already talked about this, but make friends and talk to anyone. Like I think you're going to find your really close friends, and regardless, you're going to be friends with those people forever. But I would go beyond that. Like after you make your deep connections, if there are people that are cool and they're just doing cool things, like you can just hit them up on WhatsApp and ask to have coffee. I wish I had done that more with interesting people that just I silently admired but didn't really try to have one-on-one chats with. Especially international students, because as vets, like most of us are probably from the US, and it's so cool to have friends from all over the world. So I just wish I had leveraged that and made like more one-off connections than I did.
Thank you. That was a great note to end it on. So before I pass it on to Terrell, I just want to say thank you, Matthew, Wayne, Charlotte. Thank you for bearing with me and answering all those questions. I'm sure the audience really appreciates it. But Terrell, pass it on to you.
Appreciate it, Will. Definitely want to thank the panelists for their insights and being able to kind of walk us through their thought process of, deciding to go to business school, what they were able to get out of the experience, and what they're doing now in their careers. Will, we did have a specific LGO question. I did want to give us time to answer. I know as a moderator, you don't get a chance to, answer questions, but I do want to ask you a question about, how competitive do you feel service members are for the LGO program? And it's a very technical program in nature, but years in the military, may be helpful. So can you just kind of talk about your path to LGO and there may be somebody that's here that's curious about LGO or planning to apply in November. So just kind of walking us through your thought process on LGO and how others can join you.
Absolutely. So yeah, as far as how competitive veterans are within LGO, I think the year that I applied, so the class that just graduated in 2026, I believe I found out that there were, I think, 8 veterans out of 40 something students. That number might be slightly off, but like that's a decent percentage of the LGO class. And I would say there's at least five, anywhere from 5 to 10 in each LGO class, which ranges from 40 to 50 people. Now, with LGO, you do need a STEM background, but it doesn't necessarily need to tie directly with the engineering discipline that you apply to. So for me, I was systems engineering in undergrad, and then I applied for civil and environmental engineering. And the reason being was that supply chain and logistics falls under the civil and environmental engineering department at MIT. So I was really able to tie my experience as a logistics officer in the Army to that supply chain and then kind of integrate some of the learning that I had in my undergrad with systems engineering. But I think that not enough vets apply to LGO. Even though we have a large number, I've spoken to so many vets that found out about LGO and then had already applied to Sloan and gotten in, and then they wish that they would have. But one of the things that I recommend is hop on the LGO website, find out who the vets are, find out who has a similar background to you or who's in a similar engineering discipline as the one you're interested in, and reach out to them. They are all willing to speak with you. That was something I learned from LGO admissions when I had met them at an event I attended in Boston. But yeah, definitely ask questions. A lot of what was discussed today applies for LGO, and it's an awesome program. And don't shy away from it because you think your background's not technical enough. That's oftentimes not the case.
Thank you for that, Will. Just, able to kind of help people in terms of that particular process of deciding which program is good for them. The unique thing about LGO, if you apply for the LGO program, you'll be considered for both programs. So let's say you don't get an LGO, you'll be automatically considered for the MBA program. So it does serve a dual purpose for you there.